Welcome to the comeback season, where we have real conversations about fueling your body, rebuilding strength, and stepping back into the life you were meant to live. Whether you've been caring for kids, aging parents, or just lost sight of your own needs, we see you. And this is your season to rise. Hello, my name is Nicole McLeod with Healthy Mind, Healthy Body. I'm a mindset and fitness coach and the author of I Started on a Tuesday. I know what it feels like to lose yourself in the chaos and still hold on to the hope that something better is coming.
And I'm Christy Kelsey from Christy Counts Macros, nutrition and mindset coach and food freedom advocate. I've worked with lots of women who felt stuck, restricted, and unsure where to even begin. Together, we're bringing you honest conversations, healing truths, and real strategies to help you rise again, physically, mentally, and emotionally, whether you've hit rock bottom or you're just tired of putting yourself last. This space is for you because this is your comeback season and it starts right now. Welcome back to the comeback season. We're so glad you're here with us today. If you've ever felt like motherhood has changed you in ways you didn't expect, maybe you've lost parts of yourself or you're wondering who you are beyond being mom, this conversation is going to speak right to your heart. And today we have the perfect guest to guide us through this conversation. We're joined by Amy Haydak, a parenting coach. Amy helps moms navigate the push and pull of motherhood, relationships, career, and identity. She equips moms with tools to embrace change, quiet the myths of perfect motherhood, and lean into rediscovery and meaning. Amy, welcome to the comeback season. We're so excited to have you here today. Tell us
Thank
a little bit about yourself and how you got into this type of coaching.
Sure. So the coaching world is definitely still new and a little bit mysterious to me. So I'm learning about it. My career started a while ago when I was a young lady. But ultimately I started as a therapist who didn't know much about the world, to be honest. But I worked with children and families in their own homes for the majority of my career. And there was a theme. Trauma. It was all trauma. 99% of it just seemed like trauma, and it was passed down trauma, and it was impacting the mother, the whole family. It was impacting the way the children were developing, and then ultimately continuing the trauma cycle. So that's kind of where my passion started. I would say that was maybe like 14 years ago. I think my passion started to really learn more about trauma and the science behind the trauma impact and how it was impacting mothers in general on top of what they were already dealing with in all of the motherhood spaces, and then the relationship with the children, and then ultimately how the children grew up and had their own relationships and growth and things like that. So, did a lot of trainings, did a lot of certifications, and specialized in trauma, processing trauma, trauma informed care in any way, shape, or form. And that just continued to grow. So, I no longer work in home with children and families. I now have my own private practice and do virtual telehealth with mostly adults, mostly mothers, um, in the same capacity, right? It's the same capacity, but now I'm able to work one-on-one with the mothers versus in a family component. So that's my big passion, is really just trying to help everyone break that, not everyone, because I realize the world's really big, but help as many people as I can to break that cycle. And the coaching world, I feel like, is a great space to reach more people. There's a lot of education behind trauma that normalizes it, that validates it, that helps people to feel like they're not alone and what they're experiencing is not comfortable or doesn't feel good, but it's normal based on how your brain develops in trauma.
Mhm.
You can also rewire that. There can also be change. It's not in a space you have to stay in. Um, but I feel like in any of my therapy sessions, the biggest part that really impacts moms is the education part. The education and the tools makes the biggest impact. So with coaching, I can do education and tools without actually doing therapy, and I can reach more people.
Mhm.
So long answer, I'm sure, but that's the idea of me starting the whole coaching side.
Great. Well, I'm excited to dive into this topic with you today. For our listeners, we're kind of addressing this topic of the evolving self. the woman who changes throughout motherhood, and you have these different stages of motherhood that bring something different out in you. So, Amy, why don't you get us started with this?
Sure, sure. So I'm going to follow kind of the outline of the book that I'm currently writing, and hopefully we'll be having it published whenever I'm done. But it doesn't start after you've had the kid. It starts before you even try to start getting pregnant. So, what that journey is like, or the moment you find out you're pregnant, and all of the shifts and hormonal changes that are very much alive and active inside of us, but the people around us don't always know. And we put on the mask. I'm good. It's fine. This is beautiful. Pregnancy is great. Oh, bundle of joy, right? We hear all of that coming at us. We should be happy, but there's a lot of changes that are happening inside of us. And then the shift after becoming a mother, a lot of times it's the impact of, the joyous occasion. But we got to heal, and we're not sleeping. So we can't heal very well when we're not sleeping. And then our hormonal shifts. And then a lot of times the idea of what our body is doing externally. We don't recognize our body. So who are we externally? Who are we internally? Nothing feels normal. I'm tired, right? You have this whole cycle that's happening that we know is happening, but we don't give enough attention. Um, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of spaces where it's not normalized for what happens hormonally. Our hair falls out, the autoimmune, the health issues that come after having babies. I feel like sometimes just take everything from us, literally. But a lot of stuff isn't talked about, and that makes a huge impact in general about identity. And that's only the beginning.
Yeah, as you're talking about this, I was thinking about my experiences with my first baby. First of all, I had an emergency C-section and almost died
Oh,
giving birth to my
well,
daughter.
I laugh about it now, I guess, right? But
Yeah, so yeah, and then trying to transition from, I'd been married to my husband for about 7.5 years, and we had our life together, and we just were kind of focused on us. And then all of a sudden, there's this little life that you have to take care of, and your whole world bends towards that child. And just learning how to feed her. I mean, I thought I didn't realize how many problems come with breastfeeding. And it took me months to get that down. And when you talked about healing, I'm healing from a C-section, and then my body's trying to feed this child who is hurting me at the same time as I'm trying to keep her alive, and then healing from that. And then you're so tired. And I've actually been talking about this a lot lately. Like, it's one of those things that you don't know what it's like. You hear people talk about it and you're expecting to be tired, but until you go through that, you have no idea what it's like to be that tired.
100%. It's a different kind of tired.
It is.
I remember after my first kid, I was so scared to go to sleep. We brought her home, and I was like, I'm not laying in bed. She's going to sit out in the living room with me. And I literally just watched her I was scared to death to go to sleep. And then like 2 days later, my body, it pretty much shut down. It was just shaking. It was convulsing. And my husband's like, you really need to rest. But like that idea of that responsibility, or the fear and the intrusive thoughts that come along when you have this baby to keep alive and you don't know anything about it. It's definitely an interesting space to be that a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah, that's true. So take us into the phase where we move into that self-compassion and permission to grow in this experience of motherhood.
Mhm. So I think there's a couple steps that come before that.
Oh,
There's a lot of, yeah, no, that's perfectly fine, right? But sometimes it's to be able to go into the self-compassion parts. You have to be able to understand so many components about what the change is happening. Like, what is it that you deserve self-compassion for? And some of that comes with the realistic expectations. What's getting put on you from society, from your family, yourself? That's usually where a lot of I got to be supermom. We glorify this idea of supermom. I don't understand why, because like it tears us down. It really does. Um, but almost like accepting and being realistic as to what we're experiencing
Mhm.
and how it can shape us for the good. Because a lot of times we grieve that space of who we were, who
Mhm.
we used to be. I was an athlete. I was big into working out. I lived at the gym. I was in great shape. I could squat more than half the men in the gym. Like it was great, right? It was a good space. Now I'm like, this is crazy. I can't play sports anymore. Like your body changes, your body physically changes. Um, so I think there's gotta be an understanding of that grieving process to be able to grieve who you used to be, but also move into a space of, like you said, that growth, the growth of who I am, who I'm growing into with this amazing experience versus kind of staying in the grief part and allowing yourself that permission to grieve your old self
Mhm.
while loving who you are becoming.
Yeah. When you talked about the super mom, I was thinking about my own mother, and she came and stayed with me for about a month when I had my babies, and I remember bringing that first child home and just feeling like I have no idea what to do, and I was scared to even bathe
Mhm.
bathe my daughter, and so I had my mom do it, and she showed me how to do it, and um, I was so grateful for that. But I think that that idea of super mom comes like you're comparing yourself. Like I'm a brand new mom. I'm a few days into this, and I'm seeing this seasoned woman who's raised four children, not to mention that she's helped many of her kids and in-laws with their own children at this stage. She's very seasoned in this. And I'm, as a brand new mom, comparing myself to this
Right.
who's done this so many times. It's just natural to her. And I think that that's part of where that idea of um, this perfection or super mom comes
Yeah.
from, is that we're comparing ourselves to someone who's in a completely different phase of life.
For sure. And that's part of the book. There's a chapter in the book that talks about that. It talks about the component of, feeling like you have to raise your children the way your mom did, or the way that you weren't raised because of, for other reasons, right? So these expectations, every family does it differently. But sometimes you're like, I don't know any different. Like I'm learning from my mom because that's the way I think it's supposed to be because I didn't have any other mom. That was my mom, right? And I look back and I think like as I'm experiencing motherhood myself and helping so many moms with the themes of their experiences are different, but their themes are all the same. And I'm like, man, what was my mom really experiencing like in those spaces? Because right now I know what I'm experiencing, and sometimes it sucks, right? It is not a pleasant space. And for all of the components. And it's wonderful you had your mom to guide you through that, to support you. And I think about the parents who don't. I work with a lot of parents who um, don't live close by to family, or their family potentially were the abusers and they don't want the family in the light. It gets complex. And I think about how extra isolated they feel. Because I know I felt isolated. I had an immense amount of support and love. And there were still, regardless of how many people, you still feel that loneliness and that isolation. And a lot of people don't talk about that. You have a bundle of joy. You're doing great. You're super mom.
Yeah. What are some common things that you see with moms at this stage?
So if we're talking about so I work with a lot of moms who have, I think my focus is more so with younger children. Um, I'm trying to expand more out, realizing that there's a lot of blended families and there's a lot of families who have older children and then kind of start all over again. And a lot of the themes with whether they're younger, older, whatever the case may be, is they're doing it all by themselves. Whether they have a partner, whether they have family or not, they feel alone. Um, there's a lot of struggle financially with a lot of families. And when they're trying to get the help they need, they can't because they can't afford it, or their insurance doesn't cover it, or whatever the case may be. So I think that is a big piece. Daycare is a big part. Like, do we spend all that money on daycare and go to work pretty much for free, or do I stay with my kids? But, and there's this push and pull. I want to have a career, but I need to stay with my kids. Or if I have a career, then I'm not with my kids. There's always that level of guilt, which is a huge theme as well.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it right. I'm not doing enough.
It's no wonder we kind of lose our identity in motherhood. Is
Yeah, we get engulfed. We get engulfed. Um, and it's okay to embrace it. It's okay to love that part of who you are, but recognizing that there's so many more wonderful parts and layers to us as women, to us as mothers. Those need to be appreciated and nurtured as well. But it's hard when we're tired at the end. I actually just in my Facebook group had a conversation. What was the question was like, well, who are you outside of being a mother? It's a parenting group, so we focus a lot on parenting things. So I said, let's learn about each other outside of mother related stuff. And some people posted their, old hobbies, this, that, and the other. And I'm trying to challenge them to say maybe 5 minutes a week. Like I get time is scarce right now. So I was like, let's just try 5 minutes a week to kind of sit and get back into those spaces. And some of the responses were, I just, at the end of the day, after X, Y, and Z, I don't have it in me. They want to, they have that drive, they have that passion, but the amount of responsibility, the amount of stimulation, and then the fatigue, it limits us from being able to want to. I want to just read a chapter of book at the end of the night, but at the end of the night, I'm just like, I don't have the capacity to even read. And it's sad.
Yeah. I know when I had my first daughter, we had just moved to a new state, and so I was just making new friends, and I was invited to this quilting group, which is quilting is something that I had been doing on my own before I had the baby. And then this group, they were all mothers with young kids as well, and they were getting together once a week at night and quilting together, enjoying this common hobby, but also sharing their stories. And they invited me to come to this group. And I just remember feeling so relieved that I wasn't the only one going through these things, that I wasn't the only one having these experiences and these feelings, and that I could go and share with these women who are also going through this same phase of life, and knowing that, okay, this is normal. Or, help me. What have you done with your children at this phase? And how can you help me? And that was a huge thing for me to have outside of my roles as a mom, to have that group of women who had a common interest.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a part of me creating the Facebook group is just we're all experiencing the same things. For a lot of them, I engaged with them in other mom groups or in the community or whatever the case is to just kind of see where they were. And they're all in the different spaces, right? But all very much the same themes. So the idea of I am heard, I am seen, someone else has been through this, I'm not alone. Um, that it's right with the education and the simple tools, that validation right there, it brings a lot of healing in itself. Like you just said, that's great. You found that.
Yeah. So what's the next phase or the next step?
All right. So, if we're going through the idea of, the identity shifts in motherhood,
Mhm.
I think, we talked about the newborn stage, you become engulfed, you're healing, you're learning about this new identity, and it's almost like your only focus. Like my only focus is to keep this baby alive, and everything else kind of gets pushed aside. Then the guilt kind of comes in. Well, the dishes didn't get done today because I literally couldn't get out of the chair. I held the baby all day long, right? The laundry is not done. Depending on their support system, that makes a huge impact as well. Now the kids get a little bit older, a little bit more independent. Terrible twos and threes come along. We're already overstimulated. We're already overwhelmed, potentially still experiencing postpartum symptoms that people don't realize are still continuing well into those years. Um, we're still not sleeping, right? So all of that, we haven't slept for 3 years at this point, So like the impact of all of that, people don't realize because what do they see? You're going for walks, you're playing outside. Oh, they're such a happy family, right? We have that mask on. We don't always have a safe space to talk about what's really happening. Then our kids are getting a little more independent. Oh, they don't need me as much anymore. Now they're going to school. What do I do with my time? Do I go back to work? Am I already working? Right. And then you have that identity shift as well, and that continued push and pull um, about those situations. And then the idea of friendships and like, your partner, that relationship with your partner changes because now the only thing, I don't want to say the only thing, but a lot of times the common thing you guys are talking about is, did the baby eat? Did the baby poop today? Did the baby pee today? Right? And that's the extent of the conversation. All right, the baby's up, I'm taking a nap. Okay, your turn. And you swap because it's all about survival in that
Right.
space, right? And that could last well into preschool years. Um, Another theme that a lot of women experience was that shift in their identity as a friend.
Mhm.
What friends are staying, what friends are potentially distancing themselves because they don't necessarily relate to what you're experiencing. They don't have their own children, whatever the case may be. So now you have mom friends.
Mhm.
Mom friends sometimes can be very surface, validating and supportive, but very surface. We crave that deeper connection we potentially had prior to having children. So there's another loss of identity of like being a friend, having a friend, knowing that you have that support system there to change the dynamic of your marriage or partnership, whatever it is you're experiencing. Um, and the idea of that self-compassion, that it's okay to grieve that.
Mhm.
It's okay to know that that was a space and time that I'm sad about it. And there's other spaces to embrace additional relationships. But again, it's really hard because we're really tired.
Yeah, it's amazing how long that fatigue lasts.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm guessing I know your children are older, but I'm guessing you're still experiencing it at, very much different levels.
Well, I was actually thinking the other day, at what point in my life did I quit expecting a child to walk into my room in the middle of the night? It wasn't that long ago. And my last child is a senior in high school this year.
About that. How about that? Yeah, I kind of welcome the idea of a child waking into or walking into my room in the middle of the night because what I get now is I'm in the middle of the night, like, just come in gently and get me. Why you have to yell for me?
Yeah.
So, I anticipate that it's happening at least once a night with at least one of the children. And that's just the norm, right? So don't anticipate getting a full night's sleep. That's not a realistic expectation at all.
Yeah, at least until they're teenagers. And then they should be able to take care of themselves in the night.
You'd think, right? I got a while to go, so I'm just gonna hope for the best and drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah. So school age children, and I guess that goes into adolescence as well.
Mhm.
Then you start adding activities like school activities, sports, piano lessons, tutoring, all of those fun.
Goers, play dates, yeah, absolutely. And then the hormones, right? If we're talking about going into preteens, and I know hormones are technically a preteen teenager thing, but man, I'll tell you what, whoa, my 6-year-old, I'm pretty sure she has teenage hormones already. The some of the sass that comes out, right? And I know there's a lot of moms who can 100% relate to that. And then she does other things, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're still 6, but man, it flip-flops sometimes. Yeah, there's a lot of changes that moms experience with their children growing. The idea of they don't need to talk to me as much, or they don't feel comfortable talking to me as much. What does that dynamic, that relationship change? Um, Adult children going to college and moving out of the house, and how do you maintain that relationship without hovering, without being a helicopter parent, allowing them to fail and make their own choices and to learn and grow from that is a difficult space, which may potentially make women be more engulfed with their relationship as mother, because now they're really trying to overcompensate in other spaces because they don't have that tie. They're not under my roof anymore, or they're out with their own friends. They have their own license. So they potentially are overcompensating and really trying to be like, well, I have to be a mom this way now, instead of embracing, the other aspects, the other layers of their identity.
Yeah. Yeah, my daughter who's in college right now was just home for a week, and she's actually married and her husband was with her, but we're like, you need to go to the dentist. You need to go to the doctor and check in with them while you're home. And she hasn't been to the dentist in probably since she left for college, which was 3 years ago. And of course, she had some cavities. And okay, get an appointment for Thanksgiving when you're home again, so you can get that taken care of. Like even though she's an adult and married, I'm still feeling like I need to help her transition to that. Oh, I got to think about these things on my own.
Mhm.
I can't rely on mom and dad reminding me all the time to do these things.
Hmm. Absolutely. And it's hard to allow that natural consequence in any particular age, that natural consequence of what happens when you don't do this,
Hmm.
right? To just to let them experience it. And you're like, oh, how long do I just let them potentially experience this consequence? They're not getting it yet. They're not getting it yet. And we want to step in. And it's hard to find that balance.
Yeah, it is.
I know
And
I'm going to struggle with that one big time. I got a little while, so I'm not rushing it, but it's definitely going to be a struggle, I'm sure.
yeah, and I've told my daughter this before. I said, all of the phases that you've gone through, that's a first for me too, having a child going through this phase. And so I'm sorry, but you were the guinea pig, the test child. And it is smoother for the next one and the next one. But unfortunately, that oldest child, that's probably why most oldest children are so independent and because they have to kind of figure out things on their own because the parent is trying to catch up to that stage too.
Absolutely. I can definitely see that point of view. I think it's also that, a second or third child, depending on the family, that independence as well. I know for my son, there were times where he had to figure out how to get himself to sleep on his own because at the time she was 3, having her own behavioral issues, or I was busy cooking dinner or whatever. And I was just like, I'm sorry, I'll get to you. I can't get there. Like, it's just, there's too much going on. And then by the time I was able to get to him, he's asleep. And I was like, oh, crap. Like, I'm just feeling guilty and failing and all of that. But I feel like he developed a lot, some independent. He's still 3. He's still got his 3-year-old stuff, but different independence in different spaces just because of whatever the dynamic was at the time.
Yeah, can we talk about that mom guilt for a bit? I would be curious to know if you help your clients through those feelings of that mom guilt, because I know most of us can relate to that term, mom guilt, and
100%. Yeah. And it ties to the self-compassion, right? So this is a great tie with that self-compassion and also the realistic expectations.
Mhm.
So the idea is when we put these expectations on ourselves, when we have expectations from society, from friends, from Pinterest, don't ever go on Pinterest for realistic like photos. It's never posed like that. From our parents, whatever expectations we have on ourselves, we're always trying to achieve, and our dreams are great, goals are great, I love it. But if you're trying to put expectations on yourself and your family that you're never going to achieve, not because you're not capable of it or whatever, it's just not realistic, you're always going to be searching for more.
Mhm.
It's going to take away from the idea of being present in the moment and recognizing what is going well. What are you doing right? What, that connection you have with your child, because you're always searching for more. It's not good enough
Mhm.
because of those things coming at you, because of what people are posting on social media about what their picture perfect life looks like, at least in that 30-second span, right? Um, so I think the book that I'm writing has a lot, each chapter has a component of each of these transitions from pregnancy, to empty nest.
Mhm.
And each chapter does a lot of that validation of what women have experienced, the unspoken truth, those hidden things that we just don't say. And then there's reflection and there's exercises that help to explore that mom guilt a little bit more, or whatever the particular component is in the chapter. But I think to really work on that mom guilt is allowing yourself just a couple minutes a day, once a week, whatever it is, to sit and reflect on what's happening. And that could be just following along with the prompts in the book. It could be whatever's happening in their life at that moment and then challenging it. So if my mom guilt is my son had to put himself to sleep, oh my gosh, I wasn't there. He didn't cuddle, blah, blah, blah. The other part of me could say, I'm doing the best I can. I have other children. I am running a house, like, and being able to say all the great things you're doing and also praise my kid. Because
Mhm.
my first kid could never put herself to sleep by herself, right? So part of me was like, oh, that's kind of nice, but I shouldn't be able to, he shouldn't have to do that. Oh, but it is kind of nice, this back and forth. Just pause, right? When you recognize yourself kind of having that fight in your head, just pause, breathe. I'm big about nervous system regulation, which this particular book isn't really going to focus on too much. Um, but any kind of nervous system regulation skill, because what happens in our brain when mom guilt creeps in, the overstimulation, right? Our baseline is not at a zero. We don't wake up and be like, oh, this is great. My body feels good. My mind feels good. I'm energized. We never wake up at that level. Let's be honest. So your threshold for kind of tipping over into reactive mom, there's not much there's not much give there. So it could be the smallest trigger that kind of sets you into whatever your reaction could be. That might be the guilt, it might be irrational thinking, it might be negative self-talk, it might be yelling, it might be screaming. And then there's more mom guilt. Oh gosh, I ruined my kid, blah, 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 right? All I don't say blah, 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 because it's all important. Been there, done that. But that pause between the stimulus,
Mhm.
this right here doesn't feel good. Whatever's happening in front of me, inside of me, doesn't feel good. So I need to pause and use a nervous system regulation skill,
Mhm.
whatever that might be for everyone. Have a big toolbox.
Yeah.
And then just kind of reflect. All right, what's happening here? What could I do differently? What could I say differently? And that takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, it does. I have a story about that actually. So I have three children and they're all about 2 years apart. And when they were young, that felt, well, it
Mm,
always felt too close together because now they're all leaving at the same time too. But um, at one point, I think my oldest daughter was going into fifth grade. So fifth grade, third grade, first grade. Those are the ages of my children. And we were visiting my sister in Utah, and we went up to the canyon on our last night there. We were going to cook our meal in the campfire, and my kids were down by the river playing, and they were throwing rocks, and I asked them not to throw rocks because someone could get hurt. And my youngest child kept doing it, and one of the rocks hit my daughter's head and she came out of the forest and she was screaming and she had blood just streaming down her face. And to me, it looked like it was like a major head wound.
right.
And I just lost it. I started screaming at my little boy and throwing this fit, which is not who I am, right?
Mhm.
And I stopped and I looked around, and there were all of these other people in this camping area just staring at me.
Mhm.
And I had grabbed a big pack of napkins and put it on my daughter's head. And we got in the car and we started driving back down the canyon. And I was just sitting there holding those napkins on my daughter's head and holding my daughter. She had stopped crying. All the kids were in the car. Like the night was completely over. Actually, my brother-in-law took my boys. We had two cars. He took the boys back to their house to put them to bed. And so I was just with my daughter, and I was just sitting there thinking that pause, and reflecting and thinking, this is not who I am.
Mhm.
This does not ring true with who I am as a person. And why do I get stressed out like that and yell at my kids every once in a while? And it's because I don't know why. I think I was trying to be somebody else. I was trying to be a different kind of parent that wasn't true to who I was. And that really changed me. From that point on, I managed my emotions so much better. And I don't really remember having another moment like that where I just went off on my kids and started yelling. And
Mhm.
that was a real turning point. So I will say that that really does help if you put some time and thought and energy into the pause and the reflection. It really does help.
Absolutely. And a lot of the reflection questions in the book is going to be things that help you think of that. Like, who was I before a mom? Like, what were my values, this, that, and the other? What are my values now? How do they overlap? And those values could be how do I want to raise my children? What do I want my children to learn from me? And it opens up that space of, well, do I want them to learn that I'm this angry mom? And I put that in quotations because we're not angry. We're overstimulated, we're tired, and it comes out, right? So that threshold, whenever I'm working with clients, I think of like a scale of 1 to 10. Basically, like if we hit that 5, that 6, without using a skill, without bringing it back down, that smallest trigger is going to set us into that fight or flight mode. So, a little bit of probably what was happening for you in that moment was your amygdala, which is the piece of your brain that receives the information the fastest, like a threat, quote unquote, a threat. Your child coming at you bloody, especially after your other child wasn't listening, that was a threat, right? It's not a
Yeah.
bear going at you, but it was a threat.
Mhm.
So now we're perceiving this threat because there was no pause, which understandably so, right? It's just scary. Our thinking brain never got the information. The thinking brain is that logical side that you're like, all right, let's breathe, let's put the pack on, let's go to the hospital, like whatever, which you did, but there was some chaos that happened first.
Yeah.
So the amygdala gets it way faster. If there's no pause, it acts on impulse. Your impulse usually is either, fight, flight, or freeze. So
Mhm.
you didn't freeze, you didn't run away, you fought, and the fault came out, verbally with that thing, potentially making the situation a lot scarier than it really was for everyone, right? Been there, done that. There's no judgment there for sure. But there's a reason, right? And I try to normalize that for moms. So like, why do I do this? Well, it's actually brain science, and your brain is doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to bookend that story, for the 3 weeks prior to that incident, I had been on my own with those three kids,
That was going to be my next question. I'm curious what was happening leading up to it.
parenting them away from home. We were off our schedules. Dad
Yeah,
wasn't with us. And
absolutely.
then I just want to let you know that my daughter was completely fine. We took her to urgent care. I removed the napkins and I mean, it was a head wound. Head wounds bleed a lot. I didn't know that at the time. I know now, but they didn't even put a Band-Aid on her. She was
Charged
complete.
$1 million for it, but not didn't even get a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask that, and that's important in the reflection as well. When you do have a moment, because realistic expectations, it will happen. Let's rewind a little bit. How far back is that starting? Is that overstimulation, not checking in, not regulating, not having any self-care, overworked, overwhelmed? Because now your trigger, obviously blood, that's a bigger trigger, right? But if you didn't have that weeks leading up to it, and you were fairly regulated, had your self-care, maybe kind of had those check-in moments, you probably would have been upset, may have had a little bit of a stern yell, right? But the reaction would have been a whole lot different.
Yeah.
But your threshold, right? You were already climbing up that scale.
Right. Right. And I think that's really important to think about that. Like all of these years, I'm just realizing that I've never taken that into consideration when I tell this story. And all these years I've kind of, boy, I was such a, we call ourselves a bad mom. I was such a bad mom in that moment, but I really was embarrassed with how I reacted. But
Yeah.
I feel like I can give myself some grace, remembering that I'd been under a lot of strain and stress up to that point. We
A
were,
self-compassion right there.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yes.
and we were just about ready to go home, and I was kind of on the verge of breaking myself because I hadn't had any time to myself in 3 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many moms that I work with who live that every day, all year long,
Mhm.
multiple years in a row.
Yeah,
Um, and that's, and I try to reflect on that when I'm having those moments and I'm like, man, I got support. Like, and this is intense and it brings so much more empathy to, the moms who don't necessarily have that. It's like, hey, have some self-care, go get a massage, drink your coffee while it's hot. They're like, that legitimately isn't realistic in my life.
yeah,
And that is true for a lot of women, unfortunately.
yeah. So, Amy, a lot of our listeners are in a similar phase of life as I am, where I am like I see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. My last child is starting his senior year, and then he'll be off to college, and I'll be an empty nester. And I know a lot of our listeners can relate with that. So, how can a woman embrace this stage and um, like as a fresh chapter instead of a loss?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it is important to be able to recognize that it is a loss first.
Hmm.
What happens when we have those explosion, I'm not gonna call them, whatever they're called, right? When we have those reactions, a lot of it is coming because we're not pausing and actually understanding what we're feeling. So we're experiencing grief our entire life as parents, right? You know, we're upset that they're loud and chaotic, but then when it's not there, we're grieving that, you know, those smaller spaces. So the idea of all of the children being out of the home, you've been grieving for what, 5 years now? I think basically 5, 6 years. Yeah, right. So you've been in that space.
Hmm.
Allow yourself to grieve. Allow yourself to understand what that experience means for you, how it has shaped you, how it has changed you. But it's such a wonderful space um to do some reflection instead of saying, well, if I'm not needed in the same way, who am I? And we could take that and be like, oh, I don't have an identity. I'm not a mom anymore. I'm not needed. I'm not wanted, and we could stay in that space. Don't ignore that space because it's speaking for a reason. That's just one part, though. These other parts that are coming in, um, where it's like, oh, I can breathe. I can move a little bit more. I have some freedom. But now the two of them are fighting each other. I
Hmm.
want to grieve and I'm upset about it, but I kind of like it. Which one do I listen to? I'm guilty that I kind of like it, right? It's weird. It's really busy and messy up here a lot of times. Um, and then you have the shift of if you're married, have a partner, whatever the case may be. Now it's just the two of you,
Hmm.
and there's a lot more space. And depending on how that relationship was or wasn't nurtured for the last 18 years, 18 plus years, um, that might be kind of awkward and weird
Hmm.
because you may not recognize each other. So saying, I don't recognize myself, I don't recognize my marriage. What do I do? So a lot of it is just that it's that reflection and it's that pause. Um, you have that opportunity to rediscover who you are. There's a lot more life to live individually with your partner and also with your family. Your children aren't gone. It's just a different dynamic, right? You get to re-explore what that amazing relationship can grow into with them being these amazing, awesome adults, getting married, having their own children, right? So some to give that space and time, something you want to consider is actually saying, what do I grieve the most about my kids growing up?
Hmm.
Writing it down. What do I really grieve? Because sometimes that feeling can come up. And if we're not really thinking logically about it, it overtakes us and it doesn't have a real reason, right? There's times where, and our hormones and they get kind of wonky sometimes, right? But you're like, I feel sad, but I have no idea why I feel sad. This doesn't make any sense, right? So sitting down logically and being like, what is going on?
Hmm.
Why, what am I grieving? And then saying, it's okay to grieve that. It's okay to miss that. Um, Also, what excites you about this new stage of life? It's okay to be excited about it. It's okay to still find joy or re-experience joy in this new stage of life. Um, and then what do you want to become? What do you want to become in the years ahead? And kind of setting yourself a goal. So those are some of the reflection journals actually, or reflection questions actually in the empty nest chapter of the book. There's other different exercises for vision journaling, um, being able to describe the woman that you hope to be, how you're going to fill your buckets,
Hmm.
right? Putting that energy, you have the time and energy now. Blessed to be able to have that time for yourself, but that could be scary. So
Yeah. Yeah.
allowing the scary space to exist, but also the other space at the same time.
Yeah, it's definitely a chance to rediscover your passions, your career, your health, your friendships, your
Um,
relationship with your spouse if you're
mhm.
married, and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for
Well,
sure.
I know we have more to talk about. I think we're gonna have to wait for your book to come out to finish the
Sure.
other chapters, but wrap this up for us, Amy. What are your final thoughts on this?
I think my final thoughts that I pretty much give anybody is to make sure that you're speaking positively about yourself to yourself in front of your children. Even just the idea of the way your body looks. And, sometimes it's the idea of, oh gosh, mommy's fat. I got to lose my baby fat. Your children are absorbing that, right? Like talk positively about yourself. You grew a baby. Your body is worth being honored, right? It is worth honoring that. But just I'm doing the best I can, whatever that sounds like to each person. Um, Having mantras, having those affirmations to get you through those moments, realizing that this moment isn't going to last forever. Um, the best you can do to be present. Presence is golden. It's priceless. It could be being intentional and presence, I feel like are the two key words I definitely want people to remember, because if I'm intentional and present with my children, no phone, no craziness of the world, not doing the dishes and prepping dinner at the same time, I can take 5 minutes and be present with my children. That fills my bucket for hours. It fills their bucket for hours. We are connected. Um, and just forgiving yourself when you screw up because it's inevitable. Like the idea of, you screaming and going off, you were panicked, right? Your reaction was impulsive because you were fearful. It came from a place of love. It came from a place of caring, right? It wasn't that you were being angry and mean,
Mhm.
but there's a wonderful space for repair.
Mhm.
Wonderful space for repair. And I focus a lot on that in my parenting course, which is designed for younger children. But I don't care how old you are. There's a wonderful space to say, I was wrong, I reacted, and you didn't deserve that, right? That right there makes that connection so much stronger. So in those moments where you're like, I did it wrong or I didn't do enough, talk nicely about yourself and repair.
Yeah, I love that shift in thinking. And
Mhm.
instead of shaming, it's grace and reflection and repair. I really do love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your heart with us today. This was such a powerful reminder that motherhood isn't just about raising kids, it's also about continuing to raise ourselves in every season.
Love that. Absolutely. For sure.
Amy, how can our listeners find you?
I got a couple different ways. So it's going to be overwhelming, but I'll just give you the one way. Um, You go on amyhaydak.coaching.com. AMYHAYDAK is how you spell my name. That's my website. It's got contact information and everything. A lot of my communication with any kind of coaching client, paid coaching client or just kind of there for the free stuff, either is fine. I have a Facebook group. It's called Parenting with Purpose. If you Google it, or not Google it, if you search it in Facebook, it'll come up. It's a private group. It's specifically for mothers, grandmothers. I don't care what age of season mother you are. It's for everyone. I do offer a lot of free stuff. Well, I try to do as much as I can. I do have a full-time private practice, so sometimes it's limited, but I try to do a lot of focus on nervous system regulation, a lot of space to say feelings, validate the feelings without judgment, to be heard. Um, so if anybody wants to join that, I definitely would encourage that. And anything I come out with new will be posted in there first as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. To our listeners, if you're feeling that tug of identity shifts, whether you're in the early years of staring down an empty nest, remember this: you're allowed to evolve, you're allowed to rediscover, and you're allowed to reclaim the parts of yourself that make you you. Thanks for joining us on the comeback season today, and we hope that you'll join us again.
Thank you for joining us on the comeback season. Please remember, the conversations we share here are for informational and motivational purposes only. We are not licensed medical professionals, and this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace guidance from your doctor or your healthcare provider. Always consult your healthcare team before making changes to your nutrition, your fitness, or your mental health routines. Your health and well-being comes first, and we want you to move forward safely with the right support for your journey.